This is a replay from the Vacation Rental Success Summit 2018 held in San Antonio, Texas. This event was sponsored by and with thanks to Platinum sponsor Vacation Rental Formula, Gold sponsor the Association of Vacation Rental Operators and Affiliates, Silver sponsor Abode PR, Bronze sponsors Booking.com, Proper Insurance, Point Central, and Hello Here. Join us for the next Vacation Rental Success Summit and buy your tickets now. Visit vacationrentalsuccesssummit.com for more details.
I have to reflect the thanks and the admiration back to Heather. I think we can all say more or less the same thing about her. And I also like to always start these types of presentations by reminding everybody that's in this room right now that we all represent very much the cutting edge of this industry. The people who take time out of their schedule, who leave their businesses behind, who spend their hard-earned money to come and learn and share information. We are very much the pioneers. So we all, I think, deserve a round of applause. I wanted to start my presentation off with a lovely story about my father and his best friend, Rob. Rob Thacker was not just his best friend, he was also one of his most trusted employees. And Rob also had a pretty important role in my life because his wife, Peggy, was my babysitter growing up, me and my brothers. And Rob's kids, Ryan and Sam, were very much our surrogate brothers as well. Rob was diagnosed with an incredibly rare form of cancer that gave him approximately 3.5 weeks to live. And it was the worst sort of news that anybody could imagine. But the one perhaps silver lining of the story is that for those remaining weeks, Rob was permitted to be at home. And his time at home ended up being something of a revolving door of visitors from his life that got to come and share stories, and it was a very positive environment despite the grave circumstances. This is another photo from that wonderful day, and each night before Rob and Peggy went to sleep, they would choose a movie from their time together. And it was the night that Rob selected the film Dr. Zhivago that Peggy said, "I hate that film. We're not watching that film. It's the worst." And Rob said, "Come on, I want to watch it. I love it." Peggy said, "No, it's a terrible film. We only have a certain amount of days together." Rob said, "This is my last night. I want to watch Dr. Zhivago." And so they did. And they watched Dr. Zhivago. And almost on cue, Rob passed that night. And it was a tough following few weeks for everybody. I wanted to share his obituary, specifically the last line, which I think is really neat, that Rob leaves behind a beautiful network of dear friends stretching from Bangkok to Paris, from Florida to Vermont, from Vancouver to Trenton. The mourning process takes time, of course, and Peggy eventually made her way into my father's shop in downtown Princeton. And she expressed that it had been very hard. But she also expressed that something sort of weird was happening. She said that she would be going about her daily routine in the house, and she would start hearing, like, music. And she didn't know where the music was coming from, and she would, like, begin trying to follow it, and she could sense it was coming from the bedroom. And she would walk all the way up there, and when she got into the bedroom, she would search around to see if perhaps she had left the DVD or the tape in the player, and there was nothing, no radio, no nothing, and the sound would dissipate. And she told my father this, and my dad said, well, that's a little weird, but maybe it's your mind playing some tricks on you. Maybe it's, it's in your head. And Peggy said, yeah, that's very possible. But at that very moment, Peggy received a phone call. And it was from her cleaning lady, who was in the house, and she was freaking out a little bit. She said, Peggy, I don't know what is going on, but there is music playing throughout the home, and it is the theme song of Dr. Zhivago. And Peggy quite simply said that that was Rob's way of reminding us that he was still here. Who felt something, by a show of hands, who felt something when they heard that little story? A lot of us. Would you mind just shouting out something that you felt? Goosebumps, sadness, chills, joy. Wonderful. That basically encapsulates everything that I felt too. I used to think that these types of stories that made us feel goosebumps and chills and joy were purely an art form, or perhaps maybe just random coincidence, But as I have learned in the past year, these types of stories that make us feel are actually more of a science. Today's presentation is entitled Sense of Place Deconstructed, Discovering Our Stories Within. And when Heather originally asked me to share a bit of information about a sense of place with you at this event, I wanted to make sure that whatever it was going to be actionable for our respective businesses. It was going to be information that we could take home and begin applying about our everyday businesses. So I would challenge you in the information that you learned in this presentation to begin thinking about how it connects with your work in your respective communities. Today's presentation is going to follow the following series of items. First, we are going to discuss why the gatekeepers are disappearing. Second, we are going to review how deconstructing what works about our vacation rental businesses can lead to replicating the successes over and over and over again. And third, we are going to discuss the raw materials that are necessary for everybody in this room to succeed. To get things started, the gatekeepers are indeed disappearing. Approximately 11 months ago, I was approached by two TV studios. They both wanted to jump on the vacation rental bandwagon. They both wanted to do a show all about vacation rentals, which for a small career is an extremely exciting thing. These were both names that everybody in this room would recognize. And they promised wonderful things. Huge amounts of views, 1 million views, they said we could reach. And I was really excited about these opportunities. However, they both came with two caveats. The first was that both of these studios wanted to do a makeover style show, where I go in and scream a bunch of obscenities and turn a shitty vacation rental into a successful one overnight. And those of us who have been in the industry for more than a couple weeks know that nothing in our industry like that happens overnight, and it would be potentially dangerous to be introducing people to vacation rentals with this message. The second caveat, which was, I think, worse, was that both studios, the independent offers, wanted 100% creative and ownership rights to all of the material. And those of us who practice listing site independence know that when someone else is dictating your terms, you're kind of cornered, and it's not a comfortable position to be in. And so, respectfully, I passed on both of those opportunities. But in determining the kind of show that I did not want to do, I sort of stumbled into the kind of show that I did, a travel show that would introduce the world to vacation rentals through our hospitality, what we're all really in this for, and the properties that we call home. So I took this idea to a film crew that I respected greatly. They put together a proposal. These things are not cheap. I then took that proposal to two companies in our industry who have a history standing up for independent owners and managers. A Bundle, which is a subsidiary of the American Hotel Register. They sell sheets and shampoos in small quantities. Good, you would like them. And LiveRes vacation rental software. If you're not familiar with LiveRes, it is a go-to solution for property managers at that stage in the game. And these two companies agreed to sponsor season 1 of the show. And we pulled it off in the form of this trailer.
Most people have heard about vacation rentals through companies like Airbnb or HomeAway, one of these companies that's paving the way for a much greater movement that's really just transforming the way that people travel and work and live. This show is all about diving into that greater movement, about experiencing new destinations like a local through the eyes of vacation rental properties and getting to know the surrounding communities through the eyes of their most incredible hosts. It's just become clear that no longer do you have to be a celebrity to get behind the scenes nowadays when you travel. No longer do you really have to be ultra rich to gain access to really special experiences. We believe vacation rentals allow us to get up close and personal to the people and the things that we're passionate about. This kind of lifestyle is more accessible today than it ever has been before. The rules of hospitality, they're changing. Vacation rentals are very much the gateway to a new, independent, and adventuresome world. And there's room for everyone inside. My name is Matt Landau, and this is A Sense of Place.
So this was the show trailer, which we then, thank you. This was the show trailer and the beginning of the show journey. Season 1 completed as of yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. We completed a total of 900,000 views on YouTube and Facebook. That was almost, thank you. That was almost as much views as we were originally promised by the studios. I was really happy about that. But in this process of looking back, I realized why the studios hold all the power over independent content creators, and you can draw that same analogy to other places in our industry. And it is that these big companies have access to all of this data, and they know precisely what works. They know where people are watching from, they know what portions of the film people are watching the most, they know all this stuff, and this gives them the leveraging power over everybody else. However, those gatekeepers nowadays are beginning to disappear. When I began to dig into all of our information, I began to see some really intriguing trends. The most intriguing of which is what I refer to internally as the heart rate monitor. Who has Google Analytics, by a show of hands? If you don't have Google Analytics on your website, you should. But if you log into your Google Analytics dashboard, you'll see a little thing that looks like a heart rate monitor. And in Google Analytics, that's the moment when there's spikes in volume on your website. And you can get really excited and say, oh, let's go figure out why that happened. The same is true for video, as I have learned. As you begin to dig into the engagement of the video, the spikes, or what we refer to as peak emotional responses. That's what I refer to them as. PERs would be a better an acronym for them. But these are the moments that people are watching the most. They're the moments that people rewind back and watch again. They're the moments that keep people on the page longer, which is cool. So we began to dig a little bit deeper, and we saw that across the entire first season, there were actually 3 storylines beneath every single one of these peak emotional responses. Each of them fell into one specific narrative. And today I'm going to share with you the 3 narratives. Keep in mind that these, now that we know them, if you look at all the social media that seems to be working, all the blog posts that go viral, they fit these exact same narratives. And again, keep in mind the stories that are happening in your respective communities with these narratives in mind. We are now going to move into these narratives and what we call deconstructing what works. Each of the 3 narratives are going to be presented as follows: a quick summary and the title that we have given to that narrative, a little video clip from the season that best demonstrates that peak emotional response, another clip that I'm actually just going to summarize in the form, it'll be a photo, but I'll explain to you what the clip was all about, and someone in the audience who did something just like this. We're going to pass the microphone to them to give you an idea of how it brings things down to earth. The first narrative is what we refer to as flight of the underdog. This is the narrative in which we admire the character for trying more than we do for their success. The flight of the underdog in every single scenario had intent, an individual or a group of things who wanted to get something, and an obstacle that was stopping them from getting to it. The first example comes to us from Seattle. Derek Eaton with Seattle Oasis is a property manager who is incredible. He does amazing work, and there is complete intent on building a really meaningful community business. However, there's something that was getting in his way. I'm going to start this video and summarize it while it starts as you watch the video, and if we could dim the lights. So the show is all about vacation rentals, and a visit to Seattle would not have been complete without addressing this elephant in the room, which was regulation. And the municipality took a super hard stance on regulation, pretty much deeming vacation rentals responsible for the city's housing crisis. And it was misguided because only 1% of the entire housing market was represented by vacation rentals. However, it was also very much a real threat to Derek's business. So that's where I'll leave us.
The legal struggle that companies like Seattle Oasis face is very real. With the livelihood of his business on the line, Derek, along with another industry leader, Michelle Aquavella, they organized the SSTRA, the Seattle Short-Term Rental Alliance. Easily identified by their neon green shirts, the SSTRA forged a unified voice for independent owners and managers, and they began attending city hall hearings. It was powerful to hear the stories of so many independent vacation rental professionals who found great purpose in this movement. And while the final decision about short-term rentals in Seattle is still up in the air, at least the supporters of a fair and legal solution can rest at night knowing that they did everything in their power.
I strongly encourage you to either stick with the bill as it is or expand it so that all existing legally tax-paying units get to continue. You've heard from multiple people today that have invested their retirement, everything. This business is not something that it just stops at 8 to 5. It's a non-stop business. It's a hospitality business. We are pouring our hearts and our souls and our lives into this business. And to have just one day with the stroke of a pen, that to be ripped from us, that's something to not take lightly. So please, please consider grandfathering all existing businesses before you sign this bill. Thank you very much.
So this was Derek with a very loyal and brave effort to run an honest business, but the intent there was being blocked by something very real, the municipality who threatened to shut him down. The next example comes to us from Guardea, Italy, about an hour outside of Rome. Deborah Haddock and her boyfriend Ruggero have hospitality in their DNA. And the moment you arrive on this property, you just feel like you are in the hands of someone incredible. There's only one problem. Deborah doesn't know how to run a business, and she hates marketing, and she hates technology. This is a problem. This particular scene that generated the most resonance from the entire season was when Deborah, with a smile on her face, admitted that she may not know how to do any of this, but she sure as hell was going to try. I love Deborah for that. The next example comes to us from someone in this room. Debbie, I think, is in the back corner. Can we get a microphone to Debbie? Debbie is someone who, or maybe, Debbie, you need to come to this microphone if you don't mind. Debbie is someone who faced a challenge of her own, which was a lack of connectivity amongst her colleagues in Oregon. These were a bunch of people who were doing really great work, yet didn't really have the ability to share that information with one another. Would you mind sharing with us, as a little quick summary, what happens next?
Well, I went to some of my friends and said, what do you think about having a host-to-host conference where we teach each other, we share each other what we know, and go from there? Do you think that can fly? And before I knew it, it was in the works, and it was planning, and I was chairing this group, and I was terrified, and I kind of like now. I mean, I never get in front of people. I never did before. It was like, holy cow, I don't know this person I'm becoming. But we had so much wisdom and so much energy in our community. Obviously, look at all these people. They came, we did it. And they loved it, and the vendors loved it, and it was so exciting. It was really amazing. I wish my mom was alive to see that. Oh, yeah.
Tell them what that is.
So we had our conference right next to the Airbnb headquarters in Portland, and we went over there for a happy hour afterwards, and this is them thanking me. This is actually not from Airbnb giving me these flowers, but it was from our community and our wonderful friends that worked so hard for this. It was wonderful.
Thank you. To summarize Debbie's story and the other two examples, this flight of the underdog is about admiring the character for trying more so than we actually do for their success. When you hear that someone's rooting for you as a vacation rental owner or manager, you know you're on the right track. When you hear someone saying, man, they were against all odds, that's a sign that the flight of the underdog is taking place. How to do this? You reveal your vulnerabilities. That's an easy one. Reveal your biggest failure or your biggest mistake. Remember that you need intent, wanting something, but you also need the obstacle, something blocking you from getting it. Let's move on to the second narrative. It's what we call whispers of hope. I learned that there are two kinds of hope. There's the uncertain kind of hope, which is like, I hope when I get back to my room tonight, there's going to be lobster sitting for me. It's like the cross your fingers sort of hope. And then there's another kind of hope, the much more certain, the almost like biblical confidence that there is good out there. And this second kind was the perfect setting for our first example. This one comes to us from Nashville, Tennessee. And John and Ellen are actually here in the room today. Well, I'm not going to put you on the spot. We are going to feature your father. And again, I'm going to introduce this if we can dim the lights. John and Ellen are spiritual people.
John and Ellen are spiritual.
And they go to church
once
a week with John's parents.
Who live about
and
20
when
minutes away.
in the welcome book at Heike House, where I stayed, was the opportunity to visit a room at the inn, which was a program spearheaded by John's father that takes in homeless people for the evening for a warm meal. I could not pass it up.
Ushers them into a safe place for the night. I signed up almost immediately.
It started about 30 years ago. I was a Catholic priest that had a small church near the river, and he came out of his front door of his church one afternoon, and there was a bunch of homeless men in his parking lot. And he went down and asked them, said, what are you doing here? And they said, well, we were sleeping over here under the bridge, and the police came by today, and they made us move. So we're here, and we're going to sleep right here in your parking lot. And he said, well, that's not a very good idea. He said, tell you what, I'm going to make you some peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and I'm going to open the door of the church, and I'm going to let you men come in here and sleep. The only thing I ask is, don't burn the place down. And he went home. He came back the next morning. Nothing wrong with the church. And so he thought, hey, this is a great idea. Why don't I try to get some more churches? His name was Father Charles Strobel. And that was the start of Room at the Inn, and he's still with Room at the Inn.
A warm meal, fresh laundry service, and clean beds.
We do 3 meals here. Tonight, they're all eating turkey and dressing. It's near Thanksgiving. In the morning, we'll fix bacon and eggs. We can't do everything for them, but what we do for them, we try to do really well. Here, one of the things that we insist on is the volunteers to eat with the men. And a lot of people have a misconception about homeless people. They think they're just lazy and don't want to work, but that's not the case at all. We like to engage in conversation. We like to be good listeners. You have to think about what are they doing every day. They're with other homeless men most of the time. They're talking, but nobody's listening. But when they come to this church, and should be all the churches, we want to listen.
Room at the Inn asks their guests to commit to better life choices and professional training and the accountability to solve their own problems. The experience made my visit to Nashville deeper and more meaningful. It gave me a new view on homelessness and a newfound appreciation for everything that I have. It was a private and profound part of the Odin's life, but it so perfectly fit in the scope of a visitor's meaningful vacation. And the really cool thing is that John was never really trained to offer any of this stuff to visitors.
He began like most vacation rental hosts do, from scratch.
John, did you take a photo for your father of that? Great, great. He deserves that. Again, example. Wonderful example of this peak emotional response. I got goosebumps and almost tears from watching that like a 50th time, but also one that really resonated with viewers. This is an example of confidence that there is something better out there. This particular scene generated a number of responses or comments of people saying, man, I feel like almost like a better person right now. And that was exactly how I felt after I had that experience. Next example comes to us from Le Marche, Italy. I'm going to summarize this one for you. This is Bob Gardner and his partner Ian. Casal dei Fichi is a gorgeous home in the countryside. And apart from riding their little red Alfa Romeo Spider, Bob and Ian are very passionate supporters of the environment. And they believe that every vacation rental business and small business in general has a chance to contribute a little bit back. And when you arrive, they introduce to you their Treedom project, which is a little program that they have created. They have organized with the best restaurants in town a 10% discount when you hand them this card. That discount is then passed along in the form of cash to Bob and Ian. They then use that cash to plant trees. They have planted hundreds and hundreds of trees. In fact, they have a digital forest that shows where each of the trees are located, and they are quite literally making an impact. And what I love about this is that at the end I said, so just to be clear, every guest that comes and stays is contributing to your cause? And Bob says, yeah, but it's not my cause, it's our cause. It's the world. And I was like, touche. Third example comes to us from Carolina Beach. Jim Kitts and his wife Jennifer are very passionate about giving back. And they do that in the form of traditional philanthropy. They'll donate to local charities and local school events and things like that. But they also like to recommend to their guests a visit to Biddy & Bowes, which is a coffee shop that hires only people with disabilities. We did not feel the need to actually say that in the episode because it's kind of irrelevant. In fact, when you go in there, you feel super able. You feel like superhuman, thanks to these guys' spirit. And in this particular scene, it was the moment when we all did like a big high five. That was the peak emotional response. It was the very top of the spike in this episode, which again was amongst the very top of all spikes in the entire season. To summarize, Whispers of Hope is about inspiring our viewers or readers or recipients or guests to be slightly better versions of themselves, whatever that means. The moment you're hearing someone saying, when I saw that, I realized there was still some good in the world, that's when you know you're on the right track. How to do this? Identify local causes that you're passionate about, give things away. Faith is another good example, ways that we can do this. So again, keeping in mind our respective communities, initiatives, companies, or individuals that are doing these sorts of things are worth sharing with our guests. Our third and final narrative is one that we refer to internally as passages of time. There was no narrative more relatable to people nor grander than the passage of time. It's something everybody can relate to. And as the storytellers in this case, we learned that we're not actually like asking people to forget about time by any means, but we are manipulating it in a way that they are able to go through a journey in a relatively short period of time. The first example comes to us from, I love cooking with local, and Hacienda, turn it up a little bit. Hacienda Antigua. This is the last scene in the last episode of our first season. And you'll notice that the passage of time in the form of a montage has that thrilling effect.
Slowly began to tick away on what had not just been an incredible week in the most unsuspecting of paradises, but an entire season of stories and inspiration and fun. Being able to create this show has been the absolute opportunity of a lifetime for me. Never in my wildest dreams could I have envisioned myself alongside a prestigious film crew, having the privilege to meet so many small business owners and learn what makes them so successful, to see firsthand what gets them through some of the harder times. But in my travels, I've also been reminded that underestimating myself is actually kind of the essence of the vacation rental movement in a way. People with no previous experience changing the way that the world travels just by following their instincts and working hard and surrounding themselves with the right support. My support is my inner circle colleagues. They are my neighbors, my mentors, they're my surrogate mothers and fathers, and most proudly, they are my friends. A sense of place started off with the goal to introduce travelers to the unknown world of vacation rentals. But as our season comes to a close, I've learned that the truest essence of our movement lies not in novelty or technology or cutting-edge trends, but in the very opposite, the old-fashioned styles of doing business, the original ways we express ourselves, the real human side to any story. Sometimes the character of a destination, sometimes the meaning people give to it, but oftentimes a mixture of both. This is vacation rentals. This is a sense of place.
So again, the last scene of the last episode of the first season, one in which we use montage showing a bunch of different things over the course of 6 months to communicate the passage of time, was a peak emotional response. Next one comes to us from Rome. I had the pleasure of meeting Claudio, a fourth-generation silversmith who makes a fisherman's ring for the Pope. He was introduced to me through Henrietta Kiss of Treasure Rome, vacation rental manager, who happened to know this guy's mother. Again, the magic of vacation rentals. Claudio, in our visit to his little laboratory, put his hand in a bucket of metal scraps and began molding and crafting something before our eyes, and 20 minutes later, it was a beautiful ring. And I'm not someone who likes jewelry at all, but I desperately wanted that ring, and I thought maybe he was going to give it to me, but he didn't. Until the last scene in this episode, in which we invite all the people we have met over for dinner. Claudio comes and he gifts me the ring. So as the viewer not only sees this thing being made in front of their very eyes, they then fast forward all the way to the end of our stay, bam, stamp on the edge of the passage of time emotional response. The next example comes to us from someone in this room, Mr. Rick Oster. Rick is not only a colleague now for many years and someone who I very much admire on the marketing side, but he's also a persistent dude. And when it came to a particular property that he was absolutely set on acquiring in order to round out his portfolio, and it wasn't working exactly as planned, he did not stop. And I'm curious if you wouldn't mind sharing that little scenario with maybe the microphone, give your voice a boost.
I've got a little Barry White voice going on this
morning, go.
So I'm not going to sing. But my business started in a golf resort in Oregon, and my properties were over a mile from the clubhouse, and I was successful anyway, and it never occurred to me that I had to be close to the golf course to succeed. But when I moved my business to the Robert Trent Jones Golf Trail, I was fortunate in that the first two properties I purchased were within walking distance, literally a few hundred yards of the clubhouse. And I was able to promote, you cannot stay closer to the clubhouse than in an Oster golf house. There were no vacation rentals or hotels closer than I was, or I am, to the clubhouse. So in choosing my third destination, which would complete my trinity of locations on the trail, is Auburn, Alabama. Well, the Retirement Systems of Alabama owns the entire golf trail, but they don't own the land around the golf courses. They just own the golf course land, except in Auburn. So I initially reached out in May of 2014, found out who the decision makers were, contacted them, and asked them if they would sell me some land. And they said no. So about every 3 months for 4 years, I sent them an email or a phone call or wrote them a letter and said, hey, it's Rick, I'm still here. I'm ready for you. Let's make this year the year. So finally, yes, I did get frustrated and decided, well, I'm just going to get a piece of land a mile away, or as close as I can get. And I said, well, before I do that, I'm going to write a letter to the president of the Retirement Systems of Alabama, Dr. David Bronner. He controls $32 billion of assets. And Rick Oster's going to write him a letter. So wrote him a letter, explained my story, that I've been dealing with his real estate executives who, for some reason, have office towers in Manhattan, but don't want to talk to me about selling me 1 acre of land in Alabama. And I got nothing. So I was moving on and looking for land a mile away, when 3 months after I mailed that letter, I'm sitting at my desk, and an email pops up, Dr. David Bronner, and it says, Rick, I am so sorry it's taken me this long to get back to you, but we have identified a piece of land for you. Please follow up with a few of his executives. So I made the mistake of sharing with Matt that at that moment I cried at my desk. So I am comfortable enough with my feminine side to share that with all of you and to wear a shirt this color.
And Rick is happy to offer everyone in this room a night at Oster Golf Houses as a thank you, right? To summarize the passage of time, no plot is more relatable or grander than this passage of time. It took Rick several years, but in the end, it happened. When you hear someone say, it's all come down to this, that's when you know the passage of time is about to come through. How to do this? Identify milestones, celebrations, tributes, flashbacks, scene breaks, and show this as opposed to just saying a whole bunch of time passed and this is what happened at the very end. Those are the three narratives, and now we're moving into the last portion of the presentation, the raw materials. It wouldn't be a VRMB presentation if we didn't take things one layer, like way too deep, and actually deconstruct each of these magical moments and figure out precisely, molecularly speaking, how they were comprised. We learned that when these three things were present, emotions would bubble up and they would have no idea where to go. It was like the best example that I could describe would be your favorite moment in your favorite song. It's when your nervous system is just about to go crazy. The three elements here I'd like you to keep in mind are a way to create your own magical moments in your own marketing. And the first one is what we call the big idea. It's representing a theme that everybody is relatable to. It's representing something that is layered, parenting, hard work, love, hardship. The more layers you have to this big idea, the better. And this big idea is not really relevant unless you can catapult it with the singular gesture. One specific thing or action or word or visual that represents everything in a greater way. And the third part is what we refer to as the break. The break is when the user's anticipation is violated. They think they know what's about to happen, but the story just throws them for a total loop. And when these things are combined, you start to get goosebumps. These are the things that these stories make people feel stuff. Let's go back to the examples that we used in the first Flight of the Underdog narrative and identify the singular gesture and the big idea. Derek, standing in front of the municipality, effectively begging for his life. That was representative of something so much more: commitment, family, bravery. The example of Deborah and her boyfriend Ruggiero smiling in the face of this incredibly difficult challenge they have of running a true business out in the middle of Italy. Representative, again, of something more: hard work, love, heart. In the example of Whispers of Hope, our first example was the beds. It was a visual. We chose not to show any of the recipients of Room at the Inn's project because we felt that the visual of the beds would do that for us. That was, of course, representative of homelessness, kindness, and mercy. The singular gesture in Italy was a saying. It's when Bob quite literally told me, "That's not my cause. This is the world's cause. It's ours." And again, philanthropy, environment being the big idea there. Biddy and Bose in Carolina Beach, it was the moment that we all did the big high five, then took this photo, representative again of something so much more: equality, hope, empowerment of individuals who have otherwise been cast away. Third example, passages of time. The singular gesture, quite literally, was when Sally, who you don't even know Sally, nor her husband Bo, but it was when Sally grabbed Bo by the arm during the fireworks. That was the second that the spike happened. And again, it's a tiny little singular gesture that represented something so much more. The singular gesture in our last example was when I actually received the ring from Claudio. The passage of time there representing art and culture and craftsmanship and generosity. Let's use the template to apply to people in this room right now. There's 3 people in here who have done things that they've told me about over the course of the last 24 hours that are perfect examples of this. The first example, being the underdog, comes to us from Nashville. Someone had a major struggle on her hands, and that was regulation. The municipality trying to shut her and all of her colleagues down. Would you mind standing up, Madame, introducing yourself and sharing what happened after approximately 2 years of struggle?
My name is Megan McCrae, and I'm the president of the Nashville Area Short-Term Rental Association. I can't be like Debbie and claim that I started this organization. Our fearless leader, as we call her, was Elizabeth Smith, who had the foresight that we would need something like this because she felt that the first law Nashville passed wasn't going to be good enough for them. And unfortunately, she was very right. She had resigned due to personal reasons, and I was kind of thrust into that role. And over the course of 2 years, we had a lot of breaks where we thought we were moving forward and proceeding, and then unfortunately, something crazy happened. It was really, lots of those points throughout, and one of the things that I think just kept us all going was the camaraderie of each other, knowing that this was bigger than us, that this was for our guests, it was for our community, it was for each other. One of my breaking points where I was literally like, I don't know that I can do this anymore, your episode came. And these two, clearly, I was like, this is why. So, as you said, don't ever tell him you cried, because then he asks you to do this.
You're making me cry. And what happened last week?
And as of last week, the state overturned Nashville's decision to not grandfather. And on Friday, the governor signed the bill so that those of us who have been operating legally are going to stay. So.
Thank you. Second example, a volunteer opportunity or something that is happening in your area as the singular gesture for a local cause. CJ Stam was featured in the Blue Ridge episode. His company, Southern Comfort Cabin Rentals, faced a pretty legitimate challenge. This was the fact that they had a low season when pretty much nobody came to the area. Instead of sitting and sulking, CJ decided to get together with some other vacation rental owners and managers in his area, identify the lowest week. Would you mind jumping to the mic? Identify the lowest week of the year, or weekend rather, and put something special together. What was it called, and what did it do?
Well, it's honestly a little bit more to tie some of these other stories together. The entire movement started with the Lodging Association, which was a group of vacation property managers that had come together after the failure of a company in our area, and we were being essentially pitted against each other as bad for the community. So that was the first step. Once we formed that board, we started talking about something that we could do for the area. So we basically looked for a dead weekend that we were all slow so that we could plant an event. So we went through a variety of different ideas, ultimately settled on a blues and barbecue festival because the information showed us that people liked blues and they liked barbecue, and there wasn't another festival like that nearby. So we went after that full steam. It was funny, everybody was against us doing this to begin with. But what wound up happening is once we proved that it could be successful, we did this with our own time and our own money, everybody jumped on board. Now all of a sudden the vacation rental people were the heroes of the area, and now it's one of the biggest festivals in the Southeast.
Now it's one of the biggest festivals in the Southeast, in case you didn't hear. And that, again, took the lowest weekend of the year and is now, I'm guessing, pretty much full. Sell out for everybody in the area. Awesome. Last example, and these are not exactly following in order. However, a way of doing this in your local area is picking out a small business or a small business man or woman and giving them the spotlight in the form of a little communications to your guests. Celine shares with us, would you mind, a local business that she likes to support, and that comes in the form of chocolate.
So I have a property in Mont-Tremblant, Quebec, and there's an awesome woman called Christine that makes her own chocolate. It's amazing. Handcrafts, picked her own beans. And her shop actually burnt down. I didn't tell you that last year. And she only will sell her chocolate in local businesses. So I will provide a chocolate in our property with her card and explain where you can pick it. And you can actually go at a place that makes their own pasta and buy this chocolate, or a place that's a sandwicherie that makes these amazing sandwiches, and you can buy her chocolate there. And I just found it was a great way to support local as much as you can.
This is someone who does something spectacular, receives awards on a regular basis. All you need to do is pivot that in the direction of your guests. Where do we go from here? The million-dollar question. I don't know. I am not sure where we go from here. If in this presentation you have got ideas about stories that are happening in your area that are potentially worth sharing, I would encourage you to come over to this corner of the room immediately after the presentation. We're going to share them very briefly with one another. What I do not know is exactly what we do with all this yet. What I do know is that the gatekeepers that used to block people like us from building things and distributing them with the world are disappearing. And what I also know is that if we as independent owners and managers are able to identify the things that are working in our businesses and deconstruct them, we can actually build them up as many times as we wish. And lastly, what I most certainly know is that when people like you all, the pioneers of our industry, are presented with raw materials, that you are capable of making magic happen. And that is my message for you today. I think that's the magic of the vacation rental industry as a whole. And that is a sense of place deconstructed. Thank you.